The first sign that something was wrong came when my daughter Lily stepped into our apartment and did not announce her arrival like she usually did, because normally she burst through the door with stories about school, jokes about her friends, and a dozen questions waiting for me before she even removed her backpack. That evening, however, she walked quietly across the room with her eyes fixed on the floor, while my husband Daniel followed behind carrying her small travel bag, and wearing the careful expression he used whenever he was trying to pretend everything was completely fine. I asked Daniel how the weekend at his parents' countryside house had gone, and he immediately said that everything was normal while avoiding my eyes in a way that told me there was a much bigger story hiding behind those simple words. Lily disappeared into her room without asking for a snack, without complaining about being tired, and without starting her usual dramatic debate about bedtime, which was when I knew that something had shaken her deeply. I prepared dinner hoping the familiar smell of food would bring her back to herself. But the empty chair at the table felt louder than any argument, because Lily had always been the child who treated every meal as a chance to tell us every thought she had during the day. When I knocked on her door and asked if she wanted to eat, she answered softly that she was not hungry, and that tiny sentence worried me more than any angry outburst ever could. Later that night, I sat beside her on the edge of her bed and gently asked whether anything uncomfortable had happened during her visit with Daniel's parents. But she only stared at the carpet and whispered that everything was okay even though her voice clearly said otherwise. I did not pressure her because I wanted her to feel safe enough to tell me the truth, so I stayed quietly beside her until her breathing slowed and she finally looked a little less frightened. After midnight, I woke up to the faint sound of paper moving and tape being pulled, which seemed strange enough that I followed the noise down the hallway to see what Lily was doing. When I opened her bedroom door, I found her sitting on the floor surrounded by wrapping supplies, and in front of her was the expensive drawing tablet she had saved months of dreams for. I froze when I realized she was carefully packaging the tablet like a present, because that device was not just a possession to her but the tool she used to create digital art and imagine a future as an illustrator. Lily looked up with tears in her eyes and told me she was giving it away to her cousin Evan, explaining that she thought it was only fair because he did not have one. I sat beside her and asked who made her believe she had to give away something she loved so much, and she immediately looked nervous as if answering the question might get someone into trouble. After a long silence, she finally admitted that her grandmother had told her a good granddaughter would prove her kindness by handing it over, and that refusing would mean she was no longer welcome as part of the family. My heart broke because a child should never feel responsible for fixing an adult's jealousy or be forced into giving away something meaningful through emotional pressure. When Daniel walked into the room and heard what happened, I saw his entire attitude change because for years he had always tried to avoid conflict with his parents no matter how unfair their behavior became. Daniel had grown up being the responsible child in his family, the one everyone depended on because they believed he could handle anything without needing support or understanding. His younger sister, meanwhile, was constantly treated as the one who needed more attention, more help, and more chances, which created a pattern that Daniel quietly accepted for many years. Whenever his parents needed assistance, Daniel stepped forward, and whenever his sister needed rescuing from poor choices, they expected him to be the solution. I often wondered why he tolerated it, but he always said that keeping family relationships peaceful was more important than proving who was right. The problem became obvious after we welcomed Lily into our lives because his parents slowly began comparing her to Evan, treating every achievement she had as something that should somehow be shared with him. They praised Evan's interests constantly while barely remembering Lily's hobbies, and they acted as if her happiness was somehow taking something away from him. The drawing tablet became the final symbol of that unfairness because Lily had worked hard for it, and instead of celebrating her creativity, they viewed it as something that belonged to someone else. What hurt me most was that they had convinced a sweet child that generosity meant sacrificing her own dreams to satisfy another person's expectations. Daniel picked up his phone and called his parents that night while I stayed beside Lily, and I could tell from his calm voice that this conversation was not going to be another attempt to smooth everything over. His mother answered cheerfully at first, but her confidence faded when Daniel asked directly why she had pressured our daughter to give away her belongings. She tried to explain that she was only teaching Lily about sharing, but Daniel calmly replied that sharing was a choice made from love, not something demanded through guilt or fear. His father stayed unusually quiet during the call, probably because he realized this was the first time Daniel had stopped protecting everyone else from the consequences of their actions. Daniel told them that being a grandparent was not a title someone kept while making a child feel small, and he said that family love should never come with conditions attached. His mother argued that she had only wanted what was best for everyone, but Daniel answered that what was best for everyone could not involve hurting the youngest person in the room. For the first time, Daniel's parents had no easy response because they could not blame a misunderstanding or pretend they had not crossed a line. I watched my husband stand firm, and I realized that he was not trying to win a fight but finally protecting the family he had built. The following weeks were different because boundaries that had never existed before were finally put in place, and Daniel stopped automatically saying yes whenever his parents made unreasonable demands. Lily slowly returned to her cheerful self, and she began creating again with her tablet without feeling guilty for enjoying something she loved. The experience taught all of us that kindness should never require someone to erase their own happiness, and that children need examples of healthy love rather than lessons built around fear. Daniel's parents eventually apologized, but the biggest change was that our family stopped accepting old patterns just because they had existed for years. Looking back, I realized that the quietest moments often reveal the biggest problems because Lily's silence had shown me something words could not explain. Sometimes protecting a family means having difficult conversations, setting clear limits, and choosing respect over temporary peace. Lily still draws every day, and now her artwork reminds us that confidence grows when children feel valued instead of pressured. Daniel and I learned that family is not only about sharing a name, but about creating a place where everyone feels safe, heard, and respected. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.